from what I've seen is that people aren't caught up in ideology. You've got people from the right and the left that they're really just looking at it the way they see it and reporting it the way they see it.
Welcome back to the next segment of our interview with Tariq Amin-Khan. He's a professor of political science at Ryerson University in Toronto, an expert on Pakistani politics. Thanks, Tariq.
My pleasure.
So in the first segment, we talked about Obama's appointment of Bruce Riedel as his advisor on Pakistan, and Riedel is proposing a solution which has to do with trying to broker a deal with India and Pakistan to free up, in Kashmir, to free up Pakistani troops that would then all march up to the northwest frontier provinces and I guess have some mass action against the Taliban. So as an alternative to this kind of mass military approach, which certainly could end up in just a much bigger quagmire. Not only that, as we discussed in the last segment, it's highly unlikely the Pakistani military and soldiers would even want to do it.
Right.
What can they do? Pakistan's, you say it's a social, political question that has a lot to do with money and reconstruction and education and investment in infrastructure. Right now, the Pakistani economy is in meltdown, and the Americans are not far behind. What do you do in this situation? I must add, of course, the cost of a big military operation ain't going to be cheap either, so it's not like there isn't going to be money thrown at this.
Right. I've been a firm believer that there isn't a military solution to this. Given the terrain, given the history, given the natural resistance that the Pashtuns have had against occupiers and invaders, I would say it would be very, very difficult, no matter how much military might you put against them.
This whole discussion usually starts from the point of view of American national interests, or sometimes it gets posited from the point of view of Western national interest. But what about the interests of the Afghans and particularly the Pakistanis who live in the border areas? Why is there the growing influence of the Taliban, and how do local people, as you know, think of Al-Qaeda? In theory, the real problem here is more Al-Qaeda from an American point of view than the Taliban.
Right. For instance, when the suicide attacks, which were largely linked to the Taliban, started, there was a lot of resentment amongst the Pakistanis. They were very, very upset with what was happening. The support for Taliban was decreasing. And this was a good opportunity for the government to do something in terms of trying to settle this. Of course, they used the military option, and what it did was then, get the Taliban again to fight the Pakistani military as they are doing the NATO forces in Afghanistan. And what that has done is again removed the option of negotiations from the table. So the Pakistani government now says that yes, they also recognize that there isn't a military solution, and they want to actually negotiate, but there's really nothing being done. What can be done is, for instance, there has been a process historically there in the tribal areas where the elders actually come together with the jirga and try to settle these issues. But now the jirga is also getting, its legitimacy is also eroding, given that whatever agreements that the jirga has made.
But break this down a bit. In the most broadest terms, if the way I understand it at any rate, there's probably the majority of people in the area want to live their lives according to their customs and culture. Sure. There is a segment of more radical Islamists who not only want Sharia law in that region, but they want a Pakistani state that rules by Sharia law, and certainly they want to return to an Afghan state that rules by Sharia law. Yes. So if you take these two segments, where do you think the local people come down, and who has what's kind of support?
I don't see a short-term solution. I think that there will be a long-term solution, but in the short term, certain things can be put in place. An immediate reconstruction of that area has to begin. Education has to really deepen, and genuine, public education has to increase. Alongside, there has to be debates, open debates within those communities, within the rest of Pakistan, about this whole issue of Sharia. As I said, they are a social and a political force, and they need to be dealt with in that context. When there was a left in Pakistan, you didn't see the rise of Taliban or people like them, that the radical Islamists were just not present. If they were very, very small and
I think
minority.
Before the Afghan war, before 2001, I don't think they ever got more than 3.5% in Pakistani elections.
Yeah, about 8% was the maximum they ever got. So yes, and so people in Pakistan are not at all friendly to that kind of restrictive, edicts that the Taliban are constantly passing.
Talk about the reaction to the election of Barack Obama. Generally speaking, around the world, it was received with a lot of optimism, and there was a lot of celebrating, and from Kenya to Europe and other places. But Pakistan, how did they react? Because Obama has been talking about unilateral attacks in Pakistani territory.
There was a lot of coverage in the Pakistani media about the elections, and there was a lot of discussion. And I would say the country is divided. On the one hand, there are those who are supporters of the U.S., feel that this will be a change and hope and all that, that rhetoric is there. On the other hand, there are people who do see that Obama is the first one who actually talked about attacking Pakistan, and in fact they linked the drone attacks to what Obama said, because they didn't begin until he started to speak about it. So they'll see Obama as a bigger threat or a bigger problem. But let me also say something to the earlier question, and this has to do with Kashmir, which is really the bone of contention between India and Pakistan. And I would say that there is a fairly simple solution about Kashmir, which can be fairly quickly done, and that can be a roadway, or that can be the path to actually then look at Afghanistan and the northern areas of Pakistan. And what can be done in Kashmir is that both India and Pakistan need to give autonomy, genuine autonomy, to both those regions, and open the borders between the Indian-held Kashmir and the Pakistani-held Kashmir. And I think if that happens, and that'll demilitarize the area on its own, that there doesn't need to be any force done on it. But this means that there has to be some resolve on both sides. I'm not sure whether that is there, but the U.S. can help. The U.S. can help bring that.
So whether the militarization or increased military projection is a solution for the Afghan problem, you think there is some potential solution on the Kashmir side, and there could be some progress there?
Absolutely. This is really one way to go, and I think of an important way to proceed. But the Taliban can also be dealt with. They are being hammered from all sides, the U.S., the Pakistani forces, and I think they also want some kind of a negotiated settlement and a face saving. And I think if that can be organized, they are willing to come on the table now that so much force has been used.
What actually, from the point of view of the Pakistani press analysis, as best as one can make out, what is left of Al-Qaeda in the region? Is it they're described as remnants, anywhere from remnants of Al-Qaeda to a reorganized Al-Qaeda? What do you get a sense of?
It's difficult to say. I mean, I have very little information about that, so I won't be able to comment. But I can say that the Taliban are very well organized. And I don't know whether Taliban can be necessarily equated with Al-Qaeda. They may support it, but I think they have a different, they're more regional, and they're more interested in implementing Sharia in their part of that world. And but I think they are now also willing to talk, which I think is a big shift. And I really think Obama should take advantage of something like that.
Well, after inauguration, we'll see if he does. Thanks for joining us. And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars and into environmental disaster, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Real hope means facing a complex reality. Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute. Visit therealnews.com.